Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all doing well. This is where I talk about the books I'm reading. I like to read diverse books and I highlight Canadian literature. If you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to be talking about the 2024 Canada Reads Shortlist. The debates are 8 days away. And there's lots to talk about. Here's the plan. I'm going to introduce the defenders, share my thoughts on each of the books in the order that I enjoyed them. I will talk about a Canada Reads event that I attended last week. I will share a mini vlog of that day. And then I am going to attempt to predict which book will win Canada Reads 2024. If you are wondering what the heck is Canada Reads, it is a book competition to find the one book that all of Canada should read. There are 5 books that are championed and defended by 5 Canadian celebrities or public figures. So from March 4th to the 7th this year, the debates will take place where one book is voted off each day, kind of Survivor style, until we are down to one book that all of Canada should read. So I will leave a link to my Canada Reads playlist and to my long list reaction this year, where I talk a little bit more about Canada Reads, and I will also leave links to the Canada Reads website where you can check out past winners and short lists and long lists and learn about how to listen or watch the debates this year if you're interested. So a few things that make this competition different than any other book prize are that the chosen books can be published at any time, any year. So defenders choose the book that they want to champion. So sometimes it is a really good reminder of some gems that have been published 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years ago. And it's a way of getting the entire country to read and to highlight Canadian literature and Canadian writers. So the 4 days of battles are filmed, and you can watch it on CBC Live online or listen to it on the radio. They used to do live audiences before COVID. It's just a wonderful way to unite people across the country and beyond using Canadian literature. So let's get to the books. In general, I found it interesting that all 5 of the shortlisted books are written by women. All 5 of them, to varying degrees, deal with the theme of grief. And speaking of themes, this year's Canada Reads theme is one book to carry us forward. This theme always comes up in the debates. But as I talked about last year, and something I think we need to, keep in mind, take it into consideration, is that the books are chosen by the defenders before they know the theme. So that's important because they are not choosing a book according to the theme. So there's that. Okay, I will leave that there. I'm going to talk about the books in the order that I enjoyed them. This is not the order that I think they are going to be voted off. That will come a little bit later. I will talk about who is defending the book and, what I liked and didn't like about the book. So the first book, the one that I enjoyed the least, was The Future by Catherine Leroux, translated from the French by Susan Ouriou. This book is being defended by the author Heather O'Neill. She is the only defender that I had heard of before the defenders were announced with the shortlist. So I have to admit that I have 3 or 4 books by Heather O'Neill on my shelves, and I haven't read any of them. Her book, Lullabies for Little Criminals, won Canada Reads in 2007. This is her debut novel. It was also a finalist for the Giller Prize several years ago. And I do like that that we have a translated book as part of the shortlist. and Heather O'Neill is from Montreal. So I'm glad that she's representing this particular book. Unfortunately, I was not a fan of this book. It's supposed to be a story about an alternate history of Detroit. But if I didn't know that going into reading this, I don't think I would ever have figured that out. I wouldn't have picked up on that. In fact, a lot of times I really wasn't sure what was happening exactly. The main character, Gloria, moves into her daughter's house. Her daughter has been murdered, and Gloria's two granddaughters, who are like 12 and 15, they are missing. So she is trying to find them. And it's a dystopian novel, and there were a lot of elements about that I thought were clever, like having children, have the power over their own society in the forest. I thought that was interesting. I loved the children's names, like Lego, Bleach, TikTok. There are some strange things that happen, which I thought was creative. For me, I just couldn't get into the story as much as I had hoped I would. I didn't really care about any of the characters or the story. And after a while, I was kind of hoping it would be over soon. And I think I only finished the book because I was reading it for Canada Reads, and I feel like if I don't finish it, then I can't really talk about it. So there was some good writing. There were some beautiful sentences. So I wouldn't mind reading something else by Catherine Leroux. I also loved the reverence for books in the story. There is one character who starts collecting the books in different languages and wants to teach the children how to read and write. And I also liked the idea of how the community was coming together. I thought that was interesting, and how racism, poverty, and environmental themes are brought into the story. I have enjoyed some dystopian novels, but this one wasn't for me. Perhaps I'm hoping the author has another book that, I might get along with better. The second book is the one I had read when it was published a few years ago. It's Shut Up You're Pretty by Mutonji. This book is being defended by actor Kudakwashe Rutendo, who is from Fort McMurray here in Alberta, northern Alberta. She's been in a few films, none of them that I've heard of. I did attempt to reread this book. I thought perhaps I would even change my rating of it, as I did with a reread that I did in January. But I got about halfway into it and felt like I could leave my rating of 3 stars where it was. This is marketed as a collection of short stories, and it is, but it's glimpses into the main character's life. So all of the stories are connected through the same protagonist and with several of other characters in the stories. So Mutonji says that this was done very intentionally because she wanted it to be one person's experience and not have readers think that it's all young Black women's experience. So the stories in this deal with relevant topics, and I certainly appreciate that. So the protagonist is a young Black Congolese immigrant to Canada, and it's a coming of age story, I would say. It deals with gender, sexuality, mental health, prostitution, and racism. So this book was okay. I'm glad that I read it. I've already said I didn't need to finish a reread on it, but I'm glad that I read some of it for a second go so that I would be a little bit more prepared and reminded just for the debates. I am looking forward to reading what Mutonji writes next. I think she's a writer to keep an eye on for sure. Third, in order of enjoyment, for me, was Denison Avenue by Christina Wong. The illustrations are by Daniel Innes. This book is being championed by Naheed Nenshi, who is the former mayor of Calgary, who you might think I should know, but I also didn't know because I moved to Calgary the year that he finished his term. However, he was part of the Canada Reads event that I attended here in Calgary last week. So I have some insight to him from that, and I will talk a bit more about that in a little bit. So this book is really artistic, not just because it has illustrations in it, but the way that it is written is very poetic, even in how the words are structured on the page, and the structure of the book itself. The text of the book is read one way, and then if you flip it, the story is told again through illustrations. And it sort of makes sense if you read the text first, but I'm not sure that the story would be understood as the fleshed out story by just looking through the illustrations. So the illustrations are locations. So each page shows a location from the story and shows a past and present illustration like of the same location. So I do wish that the illustrations would have been placed within the story when that particular location, was in the story, instead of leaving them all to the end. The story itself, I think, has the best sense of place. I think all of the books have a good sense of place, but this one, I think, does it best. It takes place in Toronto in the neighborhood of Kensington Market and Chinatown. The story is told in a gentle way. It is a love story and a story about community, and not just the communities that we are part of, but communities that are often overlooked and misunderstood. And I thought that was done brilliantly in this book, especially when the main character, Chosum, is thinking things but isn't necessarily able to get it out in English, and how people perceive her and respond to her and how they treat her. The book definitely gives you an inside perspective, which I really appreciated. The author uses a lot of Toisan, I think I'm saying that correctly, which is the language which I like because it is a language that few people speak. So it was another way to show how isolated Chosum could be sometimes. So when I found out that there was an audio version, I thought that I would try it to hear the Toisan spoken, which was beautiful. And it made that part of the book really come to life in a whole different way for me, rather than me just kind of skimming over it because I didn't really know what it was saying. The problem with the audio, in my opinion anyway, is that it tried so hard to be true to the written page that it stopped sometimes several times in one page to explain how the words were written on the page, like how they were structured on the page and why. So as I said, this book is really art, and it's sometimes written as poetry. So for example, let me see if I can find some here. If a page looked like this, the narrator might say something like, producer's note. Sentences or words separated are spaced out across the page to indicate longer breaths taken or to indicate longer periods of silence. And I found this quite annoying. I think that when we take something and put it into a different format, into a different medium, we have to find ways to show those things using the new format. So if the narrator had just paused longer and done what the words were indicating, I think it would have been a much more enjoyable experience and lent itself to be more artistic. I get trying to be true to the book, but they interrupted it so much that it really took away from the story for me. And I thought, if the structure was so important, then maybe this is a book that shouldn't be on audio. It would be like watching a movie and the actors constantly stopping to explain what the words looked like in the book. That would never happen. Instead, they show you things in a new way through the film that makes sense. And I wish the story would have been performed according to the medium that it is. Okay, that might have been a bit of a rant, but it really did bother me, and I thought that I would give you a heads up in case something like that would bother you as well and kind of bug you. So the book itself is beautiful. It's a lovely book. For enjoyability, these next two books could go in any order because I enjoyed them equally, but for very different reasons. Maybe I will go with the one that I had read when it was first published last year, because I've already talked about it a few times on my channel, and it ties in actually with Denison Avenue, and it is Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. This book is being championed by Dallas Sunius, who is an athlete, a Canadian national volleyball star. I had no idea who he was before the shortlist, not a surprise. But he, along with Jessica Johns, were also part of the Canada Reads event that I attended. So I will be sharing more about him and Jessica Johns pretty soon. So I've talked about this book a few times. You probably already know this is an Indigenous story by an Indigenous author, and it will be championed by an Indigenous person. The story is marketed as horror, and it certainly has some elements of horror. There are some very disturbing scenes, but it is about so much more than a horror book. And just as I'm talking about this now, I'm wondering if there have been other horror books that have been defended on Canada Reads. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but that would be really interesting, I think, to see the different genres that have been represented. Okay, so this book is also about family and community and loss. Mackenzie's sister has died, and Mackenzie returns to Alberta and her community to find out what really happened. What I enjoyed most about this book was the writing. It really pulls you in. The scenes are vivid. I especially like how dreams were used in this story. And as I said, when I first talked about this book, I could see my family in the characters of the aunties especially. It made me laugh out loud several times, as it just captured Cree women so perfectly. Okay, now the last book in the shortlist is Meet Me at the Lake by Carley Fortune. And this is being defended by someone else who is new to me, Miriam Njo, who is a fashion content creator and model. She also says she is an avid reader. So I find it very interesting that she has chosen a book that has been so polarizing for Canada Reads readers. It is the first romance book to be part of the shortlist. Now, Miriam Njo seems well aware of the opinions out there, so at least from the interviews that I've seen. And what I enjoyed about this book was also the sense of place. If you have ever spent time in cottage country in Ontario, especially in the Muskokas, this will bring you back there. This is a perfect summer beach read. And what I mean by that is that it feels summery. I enjoyed Bad Cree because I enjoyed the characters most and the vividness of certain scenes. For Meet Me at the Lake, I enjoyed the setting the most and the vibe that it created. The main character, Fern, has gone back to the resort that she grew up in the Muskokas. And this is after her mother has died. And she talks about the resort, sometimes as the resort in Dirty Dancing. And I have to tell you that there are places exactly like that, at least with, that kind of vibe. So the book goes back and forth from the present to 10 years ago and what happened over a day or 2 days. And it also gives some insight into Fern's mother's past. And this is the other thing that I thought was really well done. There are parallel stories. Fern and her mother have more in common than Fern realizes. And there are many similarities to their stories and the trajectories of their lives. So did I think this was the perfect romance novel? Probably not. The characters were fine. The story and writing were good. There are some steamy bits if you are into that. So it wasn't nearly as intense as Bad Cree, and it might be something, different than what we normally expect on Canada Reads, but I do think that it has something to offer. So it will be interesting to see how Marian defends it, and if the other defenders can be convinced to keep it around. So we will see what happens. Okay, so before I get to my predictions, I want to tell you a little bit more about the Canada Reads event that I attended last Sunday, and it was called Battle of Alberta. It was a battle between Bad Cree and Denison Avenue. So Jessica Johns, the author of Bad Cree, and Dallas Sunius, the defender of Bad Cree, were there. And then for Denison Avenue, the defender Nahid Nenshi was there. But neither Christina Wong or Daniel Inez were available. So they had Teresa Wong as a panelist. And Teresa Wong is the author of Dear Scarlet, which is a graphic novel memoir that she also illustrated, and it's about her experience of postpartum depression. I felt kind of bad for her because she was kind of the person who didn't belong in a way, but the other panelists did their best to include her, so that was good. The translator of The Future, Susan Ouriou, was in the audience. She is from Calgary. So that was great. And it would have been neat to kind of have her say some things and be part of the panel to some extent. Perhaps I will start by talking about Denison Avenue and Nahid Nenshi. So I found it interesting how this book was chosen. It is more of an obscure book, and Nahid wanted a book that not many people would have heard about, and telling a story that hasn't been told before as well. So when he talked with CBC, they suggested Denison Avenue. And at the time, the book had sold 300 copies in a year. After it was longlisted and then shortlisted, he said sales went up 92,000%. So Canada Reads can really make a difference for books, and especially for books that most of us might not have heard of otherwise. Nahid spoke about this book with a lot of love and tenderness. His approach as a politician, a former mayor, and someone who works with communities, I think is really going to help his defense. He is also very articulate. Even when he talked about the other 4 books, he was always able to highlight something for all of them. But you can also tell that he is ready to defend Denison Avenue. The one thing that kind of bugged me, and this was not Nahid's fault by any means, but one of the questions asked at the end of the event was about politics and his own future involvement. Now, he answered the question brilliantly, but it felt like a political move, whether it was intended or not. Again, I think he did well in answering it, but I thought it was unfortunate that that's where the conversation went and that it was even a question asked. And it reminded me of when I was talking to Mark Tewksbury about being a defender for Canada Reads, and I will leave a link to that video below. And I don't think that we talked about it. I don't think we talk about this in the video. I don't think this is part of the video. But in our conversation, Mark talked about how all of the defenders that year had other projects and other things going on, you know, many different things that they could be promoting and talking about, but they stayed focused on the books. And I really appreciated that. Okay, Jessica Johns, the author of Bad Cree, is lovely. She was funny. She spoke about her book very well. And I had the opportunity to meet her afterwards. She signed my book. And she was a class act. We talked about what she was currently reading, Rouge by Mona Awad, in case you're curious, and about maybe her next project or her next book, which I won't share that. But I really enjoyed learning more about her. So that was really good. Now, Dallas Sunius, who is defending Bad Cree, is very different than Nahid in that he hasn't said anything about Bad Cree. He barely talks about it. Even in the interviews, the CBC interviews, Canada Reads interviews, he is keeping his cards very close to his chest. And he even said to Nahid, you know, that he was giving away the gameplay. And here's what I can tell you about Dallas. He's a very, very tall man. He's super funny. He's got boatloads of personality and charm. And I hope that he has at least told Jessica Johns what his plan of attack will be. Because if not, I would be concerned if I were her, because it can be perceived that he isn't taking this very seriously. I don't think that that's the case. My hope is that he has a genius plan for defending this book, and will knock our socks off when it comes to the actual debates. If not, it will be very disappointing, because Bad Cree and Jessica Johns, I think, deserve more respect than that. So this event was sold out, and it was very interesting to hear, you know, two of the defenders talk about the books, or not, and some of the experiences that they've had so far with promoting Canada Reads and the books. So I will now show you a mini vlog that I did last Sunday. Some members of my channel, the Canuck Bibliophiles, have had access to some of this vlog already. It includes some of the highlights of the day. So there was the event, some hot chocolates from the Hot Chocolate Festival that's happening right now. You'll see the pups and a visit to see my mom. And then after the vlog, I will be back to predict how I think the voting is going to go down. So enjoy. Okay, so I'm just getting ready to go to this book event that is happening today at the Memorial Public Library. Unfortunately, it's not the library that is near me that I have shown you before, that Mark Tewksbury and Rob Maybe gave me a tour of for Canada Reads a couple of years ago now. But this is also a Canada Reads event, and they're doing Battle of Alberta. So we're going to be talking about Bad Cree, and by Jessica Johns. And then the other one is right here, Denison Avenue. I've read Bad Cree. I am almost finished reading Denison Avenue. I have about 10 more chapters to go. I was hoping to get it done before this event, but it just didn't work out. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what this event is, and I'm going to take you along with me. So we're going to head out there pretty soon. I just have to get my clothes from the dryer. Hello everyone, I just came back to my car and I finished the event, which was really good, and gave me some new perspectives into Denison Avenue for sure. Not so much into Bad Cree. I mean, I had already read that a while ago, but also gave me some insights into two of the defenders. And then afterwards, it's a beautiful day. I don't even have a winter coat on. The sky's very blue. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 degrees out. And I walked over to one of the street markets that has one of the hot chocolates. So some of you already know that I partake in the Calgary Hot Chocolate Festival every February. It runs from February 1st to the 29th this year. And I try to get in as many hot chocolates as I can throughout the month. And actually, I'll show you the one that I had today, and then I'll show you some of the ones that I've had in the past. And now I am heading home. I'm going to go pick up the pups, and we're going to go visit my mom. I hope you enjoyed that mini vlog. Some of you who have been around for a while and have seen my mom on the channel before, she's done one of my tags. You might be surprised that she isn't living with me anymore. She's lived with me for 15 years. And my mom went into the hospital on December the 20th, and she won't be coming home. She is palliative, and she is waiting for placement in a long-term care facility. So we are hoping that she will be placed soon. And I bring the pups up to see her at least once a week, usually on Sundays. So, okay, now on to why you are really here. The 5 books this year for me ranged from 2.5 stars to 4 stars. So none of them blew me away and were 5-star reads, but a couple of those 4-star reads are pretty solid 4-star reads. In the debates, there is always talk about the setting, and if the book isn't set in Canada, then sometimes the defenders, I think it's smart, sometimes the defenders will attempt to take that book down. But all of these books have settings in Canada or a connection to Canada. So the future being the one that has, I would say, the least to do with Canada, because it's really about Detroit. But Canada is mentioned, and the relationship with Canada is important in the story. So the other thing that always comes up in the debates is the theme. And as I already mentioned this before, this year's theme is the one book to carry us forward. And I think all of the books this year have a defense for this as well, especially since they are all dealing with loss or grief in some ways and overcoming that and moving forward. So I think that it will really come down to who does it best, both like which book is best, but also how well it is defended. Okay, so let's move on to the predictions. For my predictions, I am putting in 5th place the book that I think is going to be voted off first is Meet Me at the Lake by Carley Fortune. I think this will be an easy target. And even if Miriam is an amazing defender, I'm not sure she will have enough time on the first day to make a good enough case and convince her opponents that it needs to stick around. The 4th book, and the book that I think is going to be voted off on the second day, is Shut Up You're Pretty by Mutonji. Short stories have been hard to defend in the past. These are connected short stories, so it might make it a little stronger. But I think other books have stronger arguments to win, and that makes this book an easier target too. The 3rd book, and the book I think is going to be voted off on the 3rd day, is The Future by Catherine Leroux, translated by Susan Ouriou. I think this book has some strong arguments, and I think Heather O'Neill will be a strong defender. But again, I think there are stronger books in the competition. So that leaves the 2 books that I'm hoping will battle it out on the last day. So Bad Cree by Jessica Johns and Denison Avenue by Christina Wong, illustrated by Daniel Inez. I would be fine with either of these books winning. I think they have the strongest arguments for the debates, and I hope the defenders come through for these. But as Ali Hassan would say, there can only be one winner. And the book that I think should win Canada Reads 2024 and is the one book that all of Canada should read is Denison Avenue by Christina Wong and illustrated by Daniel Inez. We will see. Anything can happen in the debates, which take place March 4th to the 7th. So after the debates, if you haven't had enough Canada Reads, you are welcome to join me. I will be making a guest appearance along with my friend Sarah from Nova Scotia. We will be doing a YouTube live and talking with Rebecca and Tara from Canada Reads American Style. We are doing that the evening of March 7th, and we'll be talking about the entire week of Canada Reads and what we thought. So please join us if you can. I will leave links below to the Canada Reads American Style podcast and their YouTube channel, which will be where you can find us on March 7th. They will be doing podcasts I think they're doing podcasts the whole week of Canada Reads. I will also leave links to everyone's Instagram account so you can connect with them all that way as well. Please let me know, are you following Canada Reads this year? Have you read the books? Do you want to read the books? What book do you think all of Canada should read in 2024? I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.